Okay.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, and I don't know what I feel about our new setup because we're in the living room,
Yes.
and I'm liking it because I'm able to relax.
It is nice, and we're not as hot when we're in that small confined space.
Oh yeah, in the primary closet.
So we have some room to spread out, which is nice.
But it's a weird feeling because both kids are down.
Yep.
Well, let's hope our 4-year-old is down and not listening to us talk.
Yeah. Which
And
could
the-
happen. And he'd just like stand in the hallway, which I have a story for.
Yeah.
That.
Oh, let's talk about that too. And then our 4-month-old is on and off sleeping at the moment. I don't
He
know
was
why.
really tired though, and I think we were pushing him so he didn't go to sleep he could have went to sleep at 6:30. So I think now he's just like a little restless from being pushed. I think he'll be good though until I wake him up for his night feeding.
I guess he looked really warm, or he was sweating.
Yeah, because we're experiencing some type of weird spring heat wave this weekend.
It's
so it's a
absolutely
little
wild.
warmer.
It's absolutely wild.
Global
Strange.
warming for you, I guess.
We'll call it that.
It's for sure happening.
But we sound like two very drained parents.
Yes, for sure.
Is what this sounds like.
Yeah, well, also a parent who one of us went back to work recently.
That's true.
So now I've been, throwing that into the mix. And who knew commuting for only 2 days a week would drain me so much. But anyways, I took a really long
here you
nap
are.
yesterday.
I was just going to say, if anyone could guess who went back to work first.
It's me. It is not Brian.
It's not me.
But
still have
I'm
a
okay
minute.
with that. It's fine. I mean, it's so different because now I get to work from home. And so before it was 5 days a week, pump 5 days a week, rush home, trying to scramble. Now it's 2 to 3 days. In the first week I didn't even go in, which was nice. And just being able to communicate too with my job and my team. So if I am having a really off week and I need to be home for that particular week, I think it would be fine. But, the norm and what we're aiming for is I'll be going in for at least a couple of days. And then we'll see where that goes. No more than 3. I'm not going to go past the requirement. I'm not an overachiever, but we digress a little bit.
But yeah, let's talk about sleep since they're both sleeping.
Oh, yeah. Well, kudos, let's pat ourselves on the back because we managed to get them both on the same schedule. I think in the beginning, we would get Liam down and then Blair would be up for an hour, sometimes 2 hours.
Yep.
We weren't sure. But because this is not our first time around, we knew that, okay, this is the norm. They're going to go sleep a little bit later. If anything, you want him to have his longest stretches when you're sleeping. But then at 3 to 4 weeks, something magical happens in their little bodies, and they're able to they're able to figure out between day and night.
Oh, their circus rhythm.
Yes, they're able to figure that out.
Their circadian rhythm.
Whatever. You see, we're tired. They were to figure that out, and they're able to understand routines and things that trigger sleep. So, we do the swaddle because we have our magical snoo. So we're able to still swaddle him even though he can roll over and he's getting older. That allows us to do that in a safe way. So that triggers like, okay, I'm going to sleep soon. Turn down the lights, put on the white noise. And then before you know it, he's like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep now. So once he got to 3 or 4 months, we knew, okay, now we can aim to put him to bed at the same time as Liam. And I think we have been pretty successful for the last 3 weeks? 2 or 3 weeks?
Knock on wood.
Yeah,
Before
knock
you say
on wood.
that. My God.
No, but I'm just stating facts of what happened.
Oh, I know.
So we've been able to get them aligned. So yay.
That was good, except when went through his, is it 4-month or 3-month sleep regression?
It's like 3 or 4 months, whatever.
Which we're sort of maybe at the tail end, hopefully. But that
well, he was still going to sleep. It was just more of, I'm going to wake up every 2 seconds because now my sleep cycles, now we're going to bore you guys and put you to sleep. Your sleep cycles are more mature. And so after you don't go, where babies, it's like deep sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, light sleep. And now it's like, all those varying, I don't even know all the cycles, but now baby, he's going through that. So if he's waking up a little bit, if he hears some noise, he can fully wake up and it's hard for him to go back to sleep. And so now I think we're past that and the snoo has helped, but
again, knock on wood.
I'm not even going to get into this, but I did see something about someone posted. There's this therapist that I follow on Instagram, and he's like, there's always this like, what is it? You don't want to jinx something if something doesn't happen, so people don't say it or don't talk about it. But does that really change it? And
a superstition?
Yeah, right. Whatever.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
So like he was going to buy a house or they're building a house or something like that. And instead of not saying, oh, we're building a house and feeling excited about it, at first he wasn't going to say anything. And then he posted and he's like, if things don't go the way we want it to go or something falls through, that's fine because we're happy now, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we're happy now. Anyways, so we can speak about it. It's not going to change anything for us to celebrate what we've done. But since getting them on both on the sleep schedule, so now we're just kind of used to now being on the couch by ourselves. Then, grandma and grandpa at 10 o'clock, we're like, okay, time to go to sleep. But even by 10 o'clock, by the time I actually go to sleep, it's not 11. So that's why I don't do it at 11 because then I'll end up going to sleep at 12 because I feed the baby, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, we're, getting up at 10 o'clock. I think you went into the room before me. You're like, okay, I'm going to go brush my teeth. And I was like, okay, I'm going to straighten up a little bit. I like to wake up in the morning or at least have a nice clean house in the morning. So I'm just straightening up a little bit and I turn off all the lights and I go to turn and look down the hallway. And just to set up the scene, there are 2 night lights that are in the hallway just to help at night if I needed to run to the kitchen or something, or for our 4-year-old, right? In case he didn't want to make him scared. So it's just kind of illuminated by some light, just a little bit, enough for you to see something. And I turn and I see him just standing at the edge of the little runner that we have in the hallway. Yeah, just standing there. Not making a sound. And I screamed. I was like, oh my God. I was like, you scared me. And he just, in like this monochromatic voice, was like, oh my God, you scared me. And I was like, you better get to bed right now. So I helped him back into bed. I think his pull-up was a little wet. He might have been maybe going to the bathroom. Then he hears me straightening up and he just kind of froze and stayed there. But I changed, cleaned him up and got him into bed. But that we're getting into those really scary moments of him just kind of getting out of the bed and standing like in the hallway or over us in the bedroom. But recently, we must be really tired over the last week or two. We reached like a new level of being tired because now we just wake up and he's laying right in the middle of us. And also our minds always somehow set we go to sleep and we're close to each other. And then we wake up and somehow we're on like opposite sides of the bed and we have a little kid in the middle of us. So either Liam is pushing us aside or we're just like, oh, he's here and just kind of moving over for him, not even thinking about it. But he's been so quiet lately. I think he's learned because sometimes if Brian or I are awoke just a little bit, we'll take him back to his room. So now he's like, I need to be really, really quiet. And so that's what he's been doing. And to be honest, like, I just kind of let him stay. Even by the time when I realize he's there, when I wake up to feed Blair, I'm just like, okay, you can just stay as long as you get some sleep. Yeah. Because Liam without sleep,
he's not fun.
It's just, he's a different person.
He's a very different person. And we tried putting him back in his bed for, I don't even know how many weeks. and he just was restless from 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning until 6
And
or
that's
7.
got to be too much. And then the morning, you can really tell.
Yeah.
And you have the morning shift, so I feel worse for you because you can be a little.
Because there were days I'd be up from 2 a.m. onward.
And it didn't make sense because I would be like, I'm the one waking up with the baby, and I would be getting a little bit more sleep. And so now Brian's like, oh, like the baby woke up. Liam's in our bed.
I honestly must be so tired that I don't even hear anything. I wake up at 5 o'clock and I see Liam next to us, and the baby's in the crib or the bassinet and the snoo, whatever it's called. And I look at the app of the snoo and I'm like, oh, he did wake up last night.
Yeah, you're the worst. But we know I really shouldn't say that. That's what we decided because nursing the baby versus trying to give him a bottle and fully waking him up. And then.
Yeah, we went the hard way.
So, yeah. I think I'm the person in the house that gets the least amount of sleep.
Probably.
Yeah. No, for sure. I get the least amount of sleep.
Maybe we should be sleeping.
No, you need your adult
know.
time.
And
so.
if I went to bed now, I wouldn't fall asleep. Yeah. Okay, let's get into this thing.
I'm Fatima.
And I'm Brian. You're listening to Millennial and Pregnant. Or should we call this Millennial and Parents?
Well, we'll have to figure that out, but we're too far into changing now.
Oh, that's fair.
In this episode, we're going to talk about why women, especially Black women, need to be their own health advocates.
If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need in one place. In fact, this season of Millennial and Pregnant was produced and hosted on Anchor. Here's what I love about it. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. This made it easier for me to edit my episodes on the go. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I feel it's like we threw a curveball because we were just talking sleepily about our kids' sleep and our sleep. But we want to talk about something actually pretty serious today.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even in the intro, we're talking about, setting up what the episode is about, women being their own health advocates. But I think we need to stress that really, the doctors and the healthcare professionals, really need to make sure that they're acting in the best interest of their patients, or specifically seeing Black women as equal, right, to white women, and believing us when we're trying to voice our concerns, because I think you'll hear further on, how I've been my own advocate as well as other people, and still it was a lot of push to get the care that we wanted. So anyways, I digress a little bit, but in 2021, President Biden issued a White House proclamation stating April 11th through 17th would be Black Maternal Health Week. And in this proclamation, he noted the importance of understanding the consequences of systematic discrimination has on Black women, or Black mothers specifically. So I started digging into this more, hearing about this week. I think we talked a little bit about it in our first podcast, or at least in a post that I've done, but Black women are 2 to 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy related causes than white women, according to the CDC.
Wow.
So they're huge at collecting this data, analyzing it, and figuring out, okay, what's happening here. So during Black Maternal Health Week this year, it was really eye-opening to see how many Black women posted about their medical stories and their birth stories. People that I know personally, or maybe just have a Instagram relationship with, And then others I have no relationship at all, but just kind of looking through the hashtag and looking at some of their stories. And it was eye-opening in that I guess how closely some of the people that I've known had experienced some of this, even knowing those statistics. And you'll hear a little bit more of kind of why I maneuvered my birth the way, or my second child's birth the way that we did, knowing these facts. But it was, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this happens, and it's a lot of women, but it didn't really happen to people that I know. And I was privileged enough to not have those experiences, or as bad of those experiences, in my first and second pregnancy. So I think it was eye-opening in that, just knowing just how closely these things were happening to people that I knew, and just like the details of how close they were to death. As you're trying to bring life into this world, and here you are, like, about to die.
And I felt like I saw, like, this year, Black Maternal Health Week felt like everyone covered it. I saw it maybe because it was the number of women and the number of celebrities who were speaking out about their health stories, but I felt like I saw it everywhere.
Yeah, I think for sure, because people now have a platform to talk about this. Before, it's just like, okay, numbers that a CDC report that comes out and no one really knows about, or non-existent hashtags where it's easy to find what things are trending and who's having similar conversations. And so Instagram or social media has allowed this conversation to be more open, and then people just pushing this more, especially with everything with Black Lives Matter, and just being more open to talking about some of these things, which I think people are like, racism doesn't exist anymore, and slavery was over how many years ago? And it's like, no, and even having the last president we had before, just eye-opening, and just how many people are still very much racist, and now openly racist as well. So if they're going to be so brazen to talk about and be racist, we have to be pushed even harder to have these conversations on why life as a Black person in America is so difficult and so different, and the numbers don't lie. Some people try to not say, okay, science or numbers, they try to ignore those details, but you'll see as we talk about it later, it's pretty clear that these things are happening. And so why is it happening? Right.
Yeah.
And what can we do to make that better? But one of the big stories that we heard about, is Serena Williams' story. Right. So,
and she had a history of blood clots. True. Right.
So thinking it was in 2010 or something, they found some clots, and, I forget what the other thing they found, but essentially they was like, okay, you're going to have this risk of blood clots the rest of your life. So she knew she was dealing with that. I think she was on a medicine as well to ensure that she didn't get blood clots. And blood clots that was like closer, if not like in her lungs or something.
Yes. Yep.
Like very threatening, that this is really bad. Blood clots in general are not good, but like as they travel up, and clots in certain areas can be, fatal. So fast forward, she gets pregnant, how many years later, I think that health diagnosis happened in 2010. So now she's pregnant, and she's giving birth. She knows that this is, an issue that she has, and to remember it. And then I think she was having some leg pains or something after, birth. And so she's telling the doctors, the nurses, you need to give me this test because I think I have blood clots. People are not listening. I don't even know. You have to go back to the story. I forget where the original story is, in Vogue or something like that, I believe, where she, really details it. But she's pushing for them to give her this test until finally someone listens, and gives her the test. And sure enough, they find clots and rush her to surgery. And I think there were multiple surgeries that happened to stop these clots from moving up to her lungs. And so...
And this is a woman who's, I call it a position of power, and probably one of the most famous women in the world.
Yeah, like
who didn't know one's listening.
yeah, who didn't know this was her, right? Like, I'm sure everybody knew. And they're still not listening. She's famous. She's wealthy. She has a white husband, right? So I'm sure he was there. I mean, like, seriously, she has that.
Yeah.
She is educated, you know, and besides this health condition with these clots, relatively healthy woman, like really healthy woman. She's an athlete, and yet no one will listen to her, right? No one will listen to her, and she had to keep saying it. And knowing her own history was so important. You know, something like that, of course, you're not going to forget, right? She remembers that. But you know, there's other things that maybe people are not aware about their health conditions, and then they don't know that they should be advocating this hard because, oh yeah, by the way, you know, just thinking of all the things that you would want to know being pregnant. Does your family have a history of hypertension, blood pressure issues? Like, this could be preeclampsia or anything like that. Or there's so many different things that you would want to know so that you're able to properly advocate for yourself if you're like feeling a little off. It doesn't help when you give birth that you feel a lot off. So then to distinguish, okay, going down the checklist, is this normal? Is this normal? This is not quite normal. So, and then I guess there's a recent story.
Yeah, more recently, his name is Charles Johnson, but he's suing a Los Angeles hospital for a wrongful death due to the care his wife received, and she died after she bled to death hours after birth. But during the depositions, he discovered that there is a disparity in the care of women of color received versus white women of the hospital. And so I think that's in trial or going into trial soon. But that he's suing because he believes there's racism in the hospital based on the care that white women versus women of color receive.
Yeah. And so I think this is like one of the first cases that's been brought up. So this is a pretty big deal. And so we'll be watching closely to see how that all pans out. And I don't really think they're going to bring something like that if you can't clearly see some of those differences and hearing maybe some other people's stories about what happened to them. So I would only hope, even at a minimum, if he loses or whatever, that it's bringing awareness that there are a large amount of cases happening at this hospital. What is that hospital going to do to change that? What kind of training? What do they need?
This is like a renowned hospital too. It's not, you know, a random hospital in the middle of the country. It's a renowned hospital in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so these are like two really big stories, right, that we're hearing about that's getting a lot of attention. But as we mentioned before, on Instagram, Facebook, and other, you know, Twitter, whatever else, people have there are thousands more of these stories just like this. And some people didn't walk away like this guy who, you know, Johnson, who's suing the hospital right now. His wife, he lost his wife. She wasn't able to walk away with this. You know, thankfully, Serena Williams is still around. But there's so many other thousands more women who died because of this. And it's sad because there's nothing we can do to bring them back. And the big thing with reading all of these stories and hearing everything that happened is that it was very much preventable. All you had to do as a doctor or a nurse, a medical staff who are there caring for the mother, is look at the signs and not ignore her and do, you know, check a little harder to make sure that everything was fine. So, you know, because like I said before, you're feeling pretty off, right? So you really don't know if something is normal. If you're like, oh, I'm like extra tight or my legs hurt, like, is that normal? I'm not able to move the same way that I want to move. Some people are like, yeah, like, well, you just pushed a baby out of you. You just lost all this blood. Like, yeah, of course you're going to feel this way. So, you know, it's also getting those patients to be comfortable enough to share those symptoms also with the physician, so that, and the nurses to be like, okay, like that and that sounds about right, but you not being able to feel your legs, like that sounds off. Let's get someone to run some tests, and here are the tests that we should run to make sure that you're fine, and not someone giving you aspirin or Advil and be like, oh yeah, you just pushed, so you're just feeling a little off. Let's just pump you with some pain medicine. You're gonna feel better. So yeah, it was really, like I said before, eye-opening to see all of those stories and see some of the people that I know, personally, and their experience. It almost made me want to cry, because I'm like, I didn't, and I'll get into kind of our story right now too. So, yay, we found out how many, he's 4 months now.
Oh gosh,
4 plus
I guess over
9.
a year ago.
Almost
a year ago.
Yes. Over a year ago.
Oh my gosh.
Because we moved into this apartment.
Wild.
Right?
Yeah.
And
we've been here over
I
a
think
year.
about 2 weeks later, I took a test. Or not even. I think it was a week later we were in the apartment. And
it's like, were you feeling that way because of your COVID vaccine? Or were you feeling...
No, like, because...
I know.
I knew that I wanted to take a test, and that this could potentially, because we were planning for this to happen. But I don't know. I just I was like, this is definitely, like, I'm definitely pregnant. Like, even as we were like gearing up to like move and packing up our stuff, something was telling me, but I waited. And I talked about that in the first episode. I waited a few weeks to actually like take the test, because I was like, oh, it's kind of early. I would have to take those first response, first alert or whatever test, because I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm like, this is the very early stages of it. So
you are 1 day pregnant.
So, here we are, moved into a bigger space outside the city. And, I took the test, and yay, we're pregnant. And then kind of worry started to come over me, because we're new to the area. What am I going to do? I had done a bunch of research in my first pregnancy, so I kind of knew a lot of these statistics already. Serena Williams' story had already been out, and just even my personal experience with just dealing with just other doctors and seeing the good ones who treat you like a human, and seeing the ones that kind of don't, and not listening to your concerns. Yeah. And so, knowing that this was such a big decision, we decided that we were going to stay with the same doctor that delivered Liam with our son now, with our son Blair.
And that was your decision that I supported.
Yes,
it wasn't
because you were like
a we decision. It was a you decision, but I'm supporting you.
Yeah, because you didn't really get into my business on picking my OB, but you heard my concerns. Whoever you felt comfortable with. Yeah. So, I was going through the pros and cons and everything else, and honestly, it just, the pros of traveling into this city really outweighed the cons. And one of the biggest thing was, can I walk away and come back home to, or the child that we already have, to my husband, and make sure that and just to life, right? To like walk out of the hospital and be fine. So I decided to stay with my OB. And hospital. And the hospital, more importantly, because we did do research with the hospital, when my gynecologist that I had before, he was no longer an OB. Remember when we lived in the city? And so he referred me to this person. He referred me to 2 doctors. One doctor I decided not to go with, and I think he was in a different hospital. And then this other doctor was in the hospital that we gave birth with our 2 sons. And so I did the research, and they had way better statistics as far as intervention. So that means there wasn't as many C-sections that happened. And there's nothing wrong with C-section.
Intervention across the board, or just with Black women?
Across the board. Got it. So that's a good point. Just across the board, it was just lower. And there's nothing wrong with C-sections, but it's a major surgery, though. I think is great, because now women are not dying, kids are surviving, because we have this surgery, the C-sections, and it's amazing. But if a woman or child does not need to go through it, they shouldn't have to go through this major surgery
Just to
it's not
speed
necessary.
up and why would they intervene with the C-section? To speed up the process? But I'm imagining that's probably a longer process.
Yes, but who knows?
Well, then again,
some
labor
women
could be
36
hours of labor versus, I don't know how long a C-section is.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know either. But I'm sure some women who are in labor for days and days, you kind of want to get it going, right? So I did the research, and the numbers looked good to me. So, and then obviously once I did deliver our first son, the experience I had there was just amazing. Like the nurses, the doctors, everyone even from the cleaning staff, everyone that I met there was just so great. I felt like people saw me, right? And they listened to me and listened to my concerns. And the lactation consultant that was with the hospital, she was amazing. She spent so much time with me, followed up. The next day gave me several tools to help when I got home to make sure that I was able to feed my baby. And it was just amazing. I had a great experience. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to do that again. And I would say the pregnancy went pretty, similar. But anyways, I'm kind of skipping ahead. So what that meant, now that we're outside the city, that meant commuting an hour, sometimes more, to get to my doctor's appointments. And at first you're like, okay, this was a little break in the schedule that I had before. Didn't mind it too much. The weather wasn't too cold. And I was going every 3 to 4 weeks.
Right.
It was kind of stagnant.
You're talking summertime into the fall.
Exactly. And so it was kind of stagnant and so I was wearing my cute little sundresses. No one could tell me anything, rocking my little belly. It was great. And then it got cold. Then my belly got bigger and my ankles got bigger, and I had to start going more frequent, right? Because before it was 3 to 4 weeks, I would go for my doctor's appointment or ultrasound or both, depending on how they lined up in that time. And I was in and out, right? And now I would have to go back every 2 to 3 weeks. And then it turned into every week I would have to go. And by the time I was going every week, it was freezing. It was cold. I didn't have I could not fit into any shoes that were closed. Yeah. So I had the slip-on sneakers I had from my last pregnancy. And I would I wore compression socks. And then I remember I was going in, and it was like a dangerous cold. They were telling people, getting homeless people off the street kind of cold. People needed to go into shelter. And so I stopped at a Target before I got to my doctor's appointment because I need to find shoes. And in the end, I didn't even end up wearing those shoes because one, they were way too big, and I was like, these are ugly.
They're ugly.
They were white, these white sneakers. And I was like, no. I was like, and it's not gonna keep my feet warm. So then I come home and I'm like, Brian, I need to figure something out. And so you drove with me to Marshall's and you helped me find
I found them for you.
Yeah, it was these winter moccasin shoes. Yeah. So and
little little faux fur action.
So it was 2 sizes bigger than what I normally wear. That's how big my feet were. It was just, I didn't make it past 37 weeks last time, and here I am at 38 weeks. And I was like, my body was like, what? Get this baby out as soon as possible.
39.
Yeah. I was like, what is
40,
happening?
Almost 40.
Yeah. I was pretty much just shy of 40 weeks, which 3 more weeks pregnant than what I was used to was just a lot. Anyways, we found the shoes, but these were the little things that I guess I didn't really think too far ahead with, or just all the little details that would come with having to travel into the city and having to travel so far just to get to my doctor's appointments. And then don't even get me started with, or I guess it was more stressful for you because you were going to have to drive.
Yeah.
So then we were thinking, what when are we going to go into labor? Because if we go into labor on a Friday at 3:00,
Yep.
we're screwed.
We're screwed.
Because we are going to be stuck in the car for...
Well, it would be a reverse commute, so it might be more favorable.
I've driven to my sister's apartment, which is like at
I guess not until you get into the city.
Yeah, that's like northern Bronx, and even to get there at the tippy top of the Bronx is a mess, a hot mess to get to, that you run into like just the standstill traffic every single time. So we were stressed about that, right? We're like, when is going to be the best time to actually go into labor? You're going to have to drive. And Brian is the most cautious driver ever. I don't know, when did you get like that? Because I don't remember.
Cautious?
Yeah.
I've always been cautious.
I don't really think so.
No?
Not that you were reckless, but I think you sped a little bit more.
I don't want to get pulled over anymore.
Yeah, Brian gets pulled over one time back in college on our way to some break, and we were going to drive to Connecticut so that we can get to New Hampshire or whatever for your vacation. And since then, you've never sped again. But it was it was so annoying because you were speeding up so you didn't.
I know.
Like
I was
get
in
off,
the
miss your
far
exit.
left lane. No, I was in the far left lane. I was trying to get over to the middle or the right lane, and there were only 3 cars in this whole area. So I don't know where all the cars were, because I think it was 4th of July weekend, or about to be 4th of July weekend, and I couldn't get over. So I would slow down. The other 2 cars would slow down. Then I would speed up, and the other 2 cars would speed up because there's 1 car in each lane. And I'm like, oh my God, you a-holes, you were not letting me over. So then I punched it so I can just get in front of these people so I can go and exit. And of course, the moment I do that, there's a cop. I get pulled over, and it's a $500 ticket.
And so that was and $500 back in college. That's a lot of money.
And nothing. I'm like, how am I going to pay for this?
Yeah, that was rough.
A lot of extra admission tours, I guess.
So, anyways, we digress. But that was like, so now
that's
Brian
when I became a
does
cautious
not
driver.
speed.
Yeah.
Huh?
That's when I became a cautious driver, because when you get pulled over, no, yeah.
It's a waste of money, whatever. But so I'm like, oh goodness. So how on top of that, and then the traffic, you're not as aggressive too when it comes getting over. Like I in hindsight, you could have probably gotten over without speeding over. You just gotta cut off people. Like, what are you gonna do? Ram in the back of my car? Like, what are we doing here? Because you have missed some exits a few times. So I'm like, oh my God, Brian, you have to get over. Anyways, so I'm worried about that a little bit. I think you were more stressed than I was.
Because I hate driving in the city. But now I've done it, and now I do it every few months for doctor's appointments.
But then so the other thing too is, you're like, oh, okay, well, who cares? You're in traffic for about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Sure.
But I heard that the second kid just kind of like slips out of you.
They just fall out of you.
Excuse me for anyone who's like having
Which
more
just happened to my cousin.
whose baby didn't just slip out of them, but so they say it's more common that it comes a lot quicker. So I'm like, well, my last birth story was
They
checked
fell
in
out
at the hospital at like noon, gave birth at like 7.
Yeah.
And even in those first, I would say 4 hours that I was at the hospital, it was kind of like, okay, I'm kind of in active labor, not really.
Yeah.
And then the last 3 hours was like, and we were done. So I'm like, okay, 7 hours. So that means maybe it's like 5 hours, 4 hours. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's like half the time. So if I'm laboring a little bit at home, let's say for a couple hours, and then you get stuck in traffic for a couple hours, I'm giving birth in the car. So I'm like, at any sign of being in labor, I need to get into the car, and we need to drive there.
Yep.
Especially if it's a certain time of the day. So we need to get there. So anyways, with all this worry, and you're just like, we have a hospital that's 10 or 15 minutes from us.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure there are probably gynecologists that are like 5 minutes away from me. But with all this, I made the decision to still go into the city and to still risk it and have to be uncomfortable during the winter or stress about getting to the hospital on time, just so that I had a peace of mind with how my experience was going to be when I was actually at the hospital and giving birth, and making sure that I had people around me that were going to listen to me and treat me like a human. I think another thing that I started thinking about just now too, and we were talking with my sister, my oldest sister, we were just FaceTiming, and she said, "You look like you're 18 years old." I look young. I think she might.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that. I look
We're
18 years old.
carded.
I'm like nearing, my mid 30s. So
Not
soon.
even.
Huh?
You're like mid.
I'm
like
early to
mid.
mid 30s.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going towards there. And some people still don't think I'm like 18 or 21. I got carded on the Vegas casino floor. Really, I think the guy was just trying to figure out who I was, and so he wanted to look at my ID. But anyways, people think I'm young.
Yeah.
So I feel like that changes my experience too, right? Because then they're not going to listen to me because they think you're super young, or I'm some type of like teen mom, even though like teen moms, like you still should treat them like any other patient. But they might think, oh, she's so irresponsible. Like let's have like a little less respect for me, even though I'm like a well-established adult who's, has a career and everything else. But sometimes that doesn't matter, because all they do is they see you and that's it. And they've judged and made those assumptions in their head. So that was another thing that I was worried about. I'm like, these people are going to think I'm so young. I'm going to walk in here and they're going to, they're going to disregard me and anything that I have to say, because like, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right.
Kind of thing. And then by then also my fingers were, not that any of these things should matter, but just to kind of just set it up. Like, you think about when people look at you and their first vision of you or view of you, and then how they rush to certain judgments. I think I was talking to my younger sister about something back years ago when she was having an interview, and she's like, sometimes I kind of want to fake and wear a ring on her finger, because she's like, sometimes people, when they hear you're married, they think something about you, or that you're more established, or whatever else it might be, which is like seems silly. People who might be listening is like, oh, that's so silly. But these are the things when you're like interviewing for a job or you're at a hospital. By this time, I can't fit my rings. So then I also appear to be an 18-year-old or 21, less than 20-year-old, 1-year-old, not married, Black young girl coming in, trying to give birth. And just like some of the things that can be stacked against me for people not listening to me and thinking less of my voice because I'm young,
single mom.
Some people would say irresponsible because I got myself into this place, single, all these things that they might judge because of what, just looking at me. So these were all things that I was worried and concerned about. And you're like, well, you should just be thinking about your birth and like relaxing. And it's like, no, because that's like part of the package. And so I wasn't guaranteed that we're going to have the same experience with our first son, with this one. But I was willing to take that chance instead of going to some environment that was completely different than what we had the first time around. And so I was telling this to someone who I'm kind of close to, who had a really difficult birth story. And I was kind of saying, like, I'm not even anywhere close to what you experienced because I had to do this XYZ. I just had to travel. And she goes, you shouldn't have even had to even have done that.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, it just helps to get, a little bit, because I, almost felt a little guilty, because I'm like, well, I had like a somewhat really great experience.
Ooh, that hit me.
And here was someone who had like a very, 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 very difficult time. And even she validated or gave me some validation that like even me making the decision and having to travel so far shouldn't have been something that I needed to worry about. And so if I did just wanted to just have the same doctor, just because you just wanted to have the same doctor, great, do that. But if because you were worried about how your experience was, then that's not okay.
Yeah. Wow.
So, that was eye-opening, for her to say that, and for me to be like, yeah, like that's true. Like I shouldn't have to worry about that. I should have just went through the process of finding a new OB and a new hospital and saved hours, hours and hours over the last, 9 months, because it was 9 months carrying this child, where I could have just been relaxing or just enjoying and less uncomfortable traveling in the winter and stuff. So, but that's what I did. And, spoiler alert, I think we kind of talked. Did we talk about our birth story? But it was great.
It was that long ago we did an episode.
Yeah. I'm like, did we talk about it? Checklist. And I'm glad that it ended up being a similar experience that I had with my first son, with our second son, where we had amazing nurses, my doctors, amazing, that are listening to me. But even in that amazingness that happened, there was a little bit of advocating that we had to do with our first son. I think this is more of your story than mine. Well, it's a shared story,
it's our story.
It's our story.
No, and we can talk about that. But I want to talk about those charts, those statistics that you sent me. So I'll read that. I'll go through the stats and we can discuss that. But as you said, there were those stories, those mainstream media stories that are few and far between. Thousands of stories that we saw on social media, and thousands of people that we don't hear from. And here's a few pieces of information provided by the CDC to kind of just back all of that up. But so 700 women, regardless of ethnicity, die each year due to childbirth. But women of color are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause than white women. So that kind of hits you a little bit. But even when you look at the state pregnancy-related mortality ratios, even the states that have a low pregnancy-related mortality ratio, they still show that Black women are 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related causes. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the number is only 1 that dies, then 3 women, 3 Black women are dying. It does not matter how low or high the number is. It's always going to be 3 times higher.
And this is still true when you look at age and education. And
well, the crazy thing with the age one is that it jumps to almost 4 times likely as you enter into the 30 to 34.
Yes.
Which is the range that I was in.
Yep.
So now I'm 4 times more likely, because I'm older, to die from a pregnancy-related complication.
Yeah. Ugh. And we'll include this link. It should be in the description, just so you can have a reference for it. But those stats are from the CDC.
And then I guess the whole thing with education or being famous or anything else, they also looked at education level, and that didn't play a factor as well. I think it is, what did it say? It said for Black women with at least a college degree was 5 times as high as a white woman with a similar education.
Yeah. Didn't matter.
What? It doesn't matter. So you're sitting here, I can talk, I can articulate, not that education always means that, but, for the most part, I can talk, I can understand, basic things and maybe even more, depending on what you went to school for. And that still does not matter. They're like, we don't care. We do not care if you're educated. It does not matter. Because all we see is your skin color. That's it.
The first thing. But yeah, and I think, those rates are why Black Maternal Health Week was established. And that campaign, it did this year, it just amplified the voice of Black mothers, and to help center the values and traditions of the reproductive and birth justice movement.
Yeah.
This year, it felt like it was a loud megaphone.
Yep. And I think it's just going to continue to get louder and louder. Also, like I said before, staying really close to what happens with this trial that's going on right now, and just
with women's rights coming back into focus with Roe v. Wade. And, that's all women. But will we see a jump in?
It's a death sentence for some women, right? For a lot of women. If you're forced into this is dangerous, right? It's life threatening. And here they're saying you don't have a choice. You have to do it. The same people who cried that you can't force someone to be vaccinated for the greater good of the world. And, don't come at me. I don't care. For that, or wearing a mask, no, you shouldn't have to wear a mask. These are the same people who are saying, but you have to have this baby because of unborn fetus. But the woman, without the woman being alive, the baby would not be able, the fetus would not be able to be alive. So it's the decision of the mother. Hello. But, then moving forward with just talking about having a health advocate, right?
And I feel like everyone in the second birth journey, everyone was so attentive to you in the hospital, even when you had a little thing of gas inside of you.
Yeah.
They called in, I don't know who that woman was. Was she the gas expert, or she ended up providing you gas X, but she came in and she's like, so describe the pain. Tell me about the pain. Where do you feel it? She was just it looked like she was listening to you.
I don't know if she was a gas doctors. I forget what she was. I think they thought something might have been wrong with my, because where it was. Yeah. My lungs or something like that. So she was some type of other physician. Yep. And so she was asking me if there was something wrong with her lungs, these are all the things. Right. And she listened to everything because I was feeling some very intense pain. I went to go change in the bathroom and I went to lift my arm up or something. And I was feeling intense pain on I think it was my left side, in my rib cage type area where I couldn't even really lift my arm. It was just so painful, and it just felt like it came on and it kind of just stayed there and maybe gradually got better. I don't even know. I can't even describe it, but it stopped me a couple of times and it came back 2 or 3 times, and I let the nurse know. So she got a physician in. They called my doctor to delivering, the doctor who delivered my child. Made sure they called him because there's something going on. Do you remember what happened during? They kept everyone in the loop on what was happening, and check for my breathing or anything. Told me let them know if it happened again. Then she's like, okay, this can happen. Your legs open wide. You're giving birth. She's like, sometimes air can get trapped up in your body. Guys, this is serious. Gas can be very painful if you have it trapped in your body and you can't move it. It's not like your normal, I'm gonna fart and get it out gas, right? From eating black beans or something. No, it could be you hold, that's don't hold on to your farts and stuff. You have to release gas, because if it gets trapped in your body, you can have a lot of discomfort in just this whole midsection of your body. So it's serious. Even for babies, they don't tell you, big warning, if babies are gassy, they're in pain. Think of that pain. So she was like, that can happen. So here, I'm going to give you this. But once again, tell us if you're still feeling anything. Once she gave me that, I felt 10 times better. By the time I walked out the hospital, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it when I got home, at all. And so, my doctor made sure he called me again and was like, are you sure? He's like, do you want to stay another night? I just wanted to go home. I was only there overnight, but I just wanted to go home. But I also knew I was listening to him. I knew the importance. If I was still feeling that way, I would not have left. I would have just stayed, probably made you sleep there with me. But I would have just I would have stayed. But anyways, by the a time, I think the nurse and doctor was right in that I just had some trapped gas that was causing some really severe pain. So just FYI, if anyone's, don't default to that, but just something to look out for. And then, maybe like, can you just give me a Gas X pill or something? And then, or whatever stretches and stuff that you can do to help get it out. That could possibly be something that happens. It didn't happen my first time, but it happened my second time.
And I think that's something that the nurse or the doctor could have been dismissive on. And instead, the team came in and they went down a whole checklist of things to rule out. Okay, so it doesn't feel like this, so it's not as serious as something in your lungs. Okay, what about this other organ? So something that might, it's so not small for gas, but something like just gas. They went through a whole checklist of things, and they were very attentive to you.
For sure.
At this hospital.
Hands down, great experience. But even then, when we finally got to my doctor's office, we told the whole birthing story when we were driving through that traffic, and the hospital floor was like packed. We got one of the last 2 beds. Then my doctor checked me, and I wasn't super far along. I was walking around like about 2 centimeters dilated for like 2 weeks. And then he checked me, and even though I was feeling intense pain, I was only 4 centimeters, and that's like really nothing. But I think my doctor, knowing my body, and it had been 4 years in his defense that he delivered my son. It's like, do you remember how quickly I progressed? But he didn't see my water broken. And he knew I was in a lot of pain, and I was only 4 centimeters dilated. So he's like, I might have to give you Pitocin. I was like, I don't want Pitocin. Like, even through my pain, but like reviewing all the details of everything that was going on, I think he was just afraid that it was intense for me and I wasn't progressing, and I hadn't really progressed for a couple of weeks. So he's like, I just might have to do it. And so I was like, I'll hold off as much as I can to make sure I don't need to have that. And so when I got upstairs, and he's like, okay, I went over to the hospital, and he's like, I'll be over. And when I got there, and my nurse JJ, shout out to her, I told her, I was like, my doctor was worried that I wasn't going to progress really quickly. I don't want Pitocin. I was like, I might, in whatever state or pain that I'm in, you were still waiting to get upstairs. Yeah. So I was talking to her, and I wanted just to make sure she knew. And she's like, okay. She's like, yeah. She's listening to me. She's like, I will make sure. She's like, there's a little bit, she's like, are you fine with like when you deliver the placenta, we use it for that? That just helps to make sure we get everything. And I was like, yes, I'm okay with that. I was like, I just don't want to use that in the birth of my son. And so I even heard her say something to either another nurse, because she was actually she'd been a nurse in a different department, but she just recently went over to labor and delivery. I even heard her say it's the other nurse who was kind of just shadowing her. I think the part that she was in her training was that someone was just looking. No one was really intervening, and at points she was the only person in the room. So she did amazing for it to be like, she's a newbie, and she was just great. Yeah. I can't stress that enough. And I heard her, say that to the other nurse, and I don't know, she told the doctor. I don't know, but she just...
The doctor had come in at some point, and he had mentioned Pitocin, and she's like, no, that's, just for the... That's for the placenta, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So she's like, oh yeah, for sure. She's like, I'll make sure. So even like a small little request at that, which again, placenta, Pitocin is not terrible if you need it. If you don't need it, no one needs to give it to you, because, your body, will know what to do. Well, naturally, but sometimes it needs that extra push, because sometimes stuff happens, right? Just like you would need to take Advil for a headache. Sometimes you need to take Pitocin to help get your body a jump start to deliver your baby if it's stuck or it's just not doing what it's supposed to. I'm a full supporter of medicine and science and having and intervening when you need to intervene. I knew my body and the pain and stuff that I was feeling, and I knew I was like, I don't need it. Then when they checked me, when he finally got there and he checked me, no, I think, did they check me before? They checked me before I got the epidural. I was close to 8 centimeters dilated. He came and he was like, you can give birth anytime now. By the time my doctor got there, which was less than like 3 hours, or just about 3 hours when I was there, I was already like close to 10 centimeters dilated. So crisis averted. I didn't need it. I think, and then when he was checking me, I think at that time I was like, oh, my water just broke, because I felt the rush of water. And he's like, yep. So he's like, any second now, because here I am, almost 10 centimeters dilated, and my water broke. So I was giving birth. He's like, any second, and then they just walk out.
And then he just left. He was very casual.
I'm like, any second, so stay in the room with me. Exactly. No, they'll say any second, and they're like, okay, just buzz us. He's like, don't push. You might feel pressure, just don't push. And I was like, you don't have to tell me twice. I'm not gonna push. But just those like little things of, me telling my nurse, you telling the first time around that to him, to my doctor, being like, no Pitocin. Because at that time, no one even had a conversation with me. Even as great as much as I love my doctor and how he did a great job with both my pregnancies and deliveries,
he turns
in the first time that we were in that experience, he wasn't even consulting me on the Pitocin. We knew to look out for. We wouldn't have even known
after watching that documentary
what
by
Pitocin
Ricky
was.
Lake.
What'd you say?
After watching that documentary with Ricky Lake.
The Business of Being Born. We watched that documentary, and she talked about Pitocin in there, and I would have thought it was just like some, like if you said IV, it would like, I was like, oh, okay, they're just giving me like a little medicine, like, and not really questioning it. And because we watched that, because I'm a big researcher and whatever I do, being the Virgo that I am, and so that was one of the things I did to prepare for pregnancy and prepare for labor. So I knew to look out for that term, and so you kind of heard him just say that to the nurse.
He was like ordering it.
And
I was like, nope. Nope.
Yep.
Like, she does not want Pitocin.
Yep.
And then I think he tried to be like, well, I think we'll need it at some point. Or like, we don't need it now.
Yeah, we don't need it now. So there's no need to order it. And so it's just like, once again, it's the business of being born. The first time around, I gave birth on Mother's Day, pulled him away from Mother's Day, and really I was the only person there, so I was like, okay, I don't want to be here, and I was the only person here. And then the second time around is the extreme, where the entire floor was taken up.
It's a weekday, so everyone's in normal business hours.
Yes, you need a bed. Women need to be born. Babies need to be born. Women need to be born.
And mother is also born the same day.
Yes, we know. That's for another episode. But like, so there was the extreme of trying to free up a bed. So, of course, I wonder how many women on that floor got Pitocin if they didn't give birth as quickly as I did. I think I got out of that floor before most of the women that were there before me. That's how quickly it happened.
Yeah.
So,
second kid just falls out.
Huh?
The second kid just falls out.
Seriously, they really do. Because my doctor goes, did I even do anything? I was like, and so the nurse goes, yeah, he should remember that when he sends you the bill.
And I want to be like, do you remember the first time you just caught the kid?
Yeah. I'm like, how many babies have you birthed?
I know.
That like I'm not going to remember everybody's.
Yeah.
Right. But I was like, did you not put a note in my little thing being like, she gets birth really quickly?
Yeah.
Because the first
she
time
doesn't need me.
He's rushing in. My mom's helping him put on his like surgical things because that's how quickly it had happened the first time. So the second time was not a surprise, at least for me, that happened. But like with all that being said, it just makes it more important for you to one, be an advocate for yourself. So that, what does that mean? How can you be an advocate for yourself, knowing like just a little bit of the terminology and stuff that they use right in there, but also you can make sure being like, what is that? So what if you didn't watch the Business Being Born? If you hear a doctor or someone putting something in your IV or doing something, you have the right to be like, what is that?
What
are you doing?
What does it do?
Do I need it? Is it absolutely necessary? Like, you can ask those questions. There are going to be times, for sure, emergencies where you're like, they're telling you you're in distress, so you can't really figure out what's happening, or the baby's in distress and they have to act quickly. So there are times where you can't do that. But in my situations, I had the privilege or luxury of being able to be like, what is that? What's going on? Do I really need that? I don't really need that. And I knew the terms to look out for. So I think it's important that ask those questions. If you can't ask the questions, knowing that there's someone else in the room, whether it's your husband or your partner, whoever is your birthing person, that's there, that they kind of know how you want things to go, and advocating to make sure that you're getting the experience and the care that you need. And even if you have no one in the room, I had no one for a short amount of time. I had no one. I just had my nurse, JJ, and that's it. So I let her know what I want. I was like, for whatever reason, if my husband, who's right downstairs, can't get up here before I have to get this baby out of me, please make sure that this doesn't happen. So using your voice is super important, and making sure, you know, like Serena Williams had to keep pushing if people are not listening to you, and making sure it's known. So having those advocates is super important. But then ultimately, when it comes down to it, these healthcare professionals needs to make sure that they're listening, and that someone doesn't have to repeat themselves multiple times. And sometimes you don't know better than what the patient knows, because if the patient is telling you they're in pain or in distress, you have to listen to them. You have to listen to them. And that's important. And so there needs to be, I don't have all the answers, trainings, some way, for the current people who are in this system, to make sure that they're not doing some of these things, either because
removing bias.
Yes, in the subconscious they don't know what's happening, or whether they're just truly being discriminatory, right? That needs to be figured out. But even more importantly, then we also need to have more professionals who are of a different ethnicity or background, who are flooding these systems, so that they can advocate on the behalf of some of these people. And because they're Black women, so they know, you know. And not to say that not some Black women, you know, might not see some, you know, because they're being trained and educated in the same system, that they can turn out doing the same thing. But it helps if, like, you know, you get as many as possible, so that it'll change the numbers. So
want your healthcare
so that's a longer game, huh?
Want your healthcare teams across the country to reflect the population.
Exactly. And so that's a much longer game, right? Because you have to get people into the profession, trained and everything else. But there needs to be some type of push and funding and education around that, and getting people into these different professions.
And regardless of geography, cities, like, the makeup of a city can't be the same makeup of the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, you have to spread the, you know, where we are predominantly white, you know, you need to still have diversity amongst your staff.
Exactly. Because it's just important. But yeah, I think that's my suggestion. We'll see what happens. And like I said before, I'm very curious to see what additional stories come out next year around this week, as well as what comes out of this case that's happening, to see what kind of changes the hospital. I think regardless, the bad publicity is going to push them to do something, to say we're doing XYZ, or at least to show the numbers or show what they're currently doing, something.
And other major hospitals might be already looking at that, seeing what's going on with this hospital.
Yeah.
Like, let's double check ours. Let's hopefully, if it's a hospital who doesn't want to encounter the same situation.
Because these numbers are higher than some third world countries where Black women are dying, which the last I checked, we're not a third world country. So why is this happening? Right. So hopefully the numbers get better. Hopefully these stories are some of the last that I'll hear of horror stories, right? And sometimes you can't avoid it. It's just women's bodies and doesn't always do what you want it to do. But like I said before, what they're saying with a lot of this research is a lot of these deaths are very preventable. If we just listened and saw the signs of clots, of hemorrhaging, then these women could still be alive. That's all for this episode, but make sure you're following the show so you know when the next episode is out.
Check out our website, liliesandloafers.com, for cooking and DIY inspiration and more updates from our growing family.
Millennial and Pregnant is a Lilies and Loafers original podcast. It's hosted by me, Fatima.
And me, Brian. Original music by Purple Planet. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.